Welcome to my channel. Today we'll read about Chaucer, the towering figure of Middle English period. Chaucer lifespan from 1340 to 1400. Now, age of Chaucer. You can imagine that an age is named after a person. So, what influence that person had on that age? Political and historical background. After Norman conquest, the second major phase in the Middle English period was the age of Chaucer. Chaucer was such a bright literary figure of his time that a whole century was named after him. As the Pope represents the early 18th century, the age of Pope, we tell Johnson, the age of Johnson, Tennyson, Victorian period. Chaucer symbolizes the spirit of Middle English period. Again, like Dante, Chaucer was a kind of bridge between the Middle English period and the Renaissance. He is the evening star of the medieval day and the morning star of Renaissance. He possessed the rare opportunity to live under three monarchs. This is very important for short question or multiple type question. That Chaucer lived under three monarchs, Edward III, Richard II and Henry IV. He was born during the reign of Edward III, 1327 to 77. In 1377, Richard II succeeded the throne and in 1399 he was forced to abdicate. With the accession of Henry IV, the Duke of Lancaster, the Lancastrian dynasty started. Chaucer died 1 year after the succession of Henry IV. As a result of this volatile political scenario, his lifespan was marked with a constant shift of social and political trajectory. At first, Edward III, then Richard II, and then Henry IV. These three kingships and then social and political change during these kingships also affected Chaucer's life and career. The groundbreaking incidents that shook Chaucer's era were at first 100 Years' War. We have already read about 100 Years' War. What was the cause of 100 Years' War? 1337 to 1443. Edward III was the son of Edward II and Isabella. And who was this Isabella? Isabella was from French dynasty. So after his father's death, Edward III took England's throne. But at the same time, he claimed the maternal throne in France. Okay. At that time in France, Charles IV had no heir to succeed him after his death. So Isabella, Edward III's mother and Edward II's wife, who was from French descendant, think that it is okay to demand on the part of Edward III. So she obviously supported his son. Now, this incident led to 100 Years' War because France was not ready to accept this, that Edward III will come and conquer the land. That's why 100 Years' War from 1337 to 1453 started. When Edward III tried to conquer Normandy, okay, and Chaucer also participated in this war. Though it was named as 100 Years' War, actually it was dragged on 116 years in reality. The next important incident that shook the medieval Europe as well as England is Black Death, 1348 to 49. It is a plague epidemic, bubonic plague, Black Death in England. It ravaged the social as well as the political scenario of England as well as the whole Europe. And this is very important to note down that Boccaccio in his The Decameron narrated this vicious epidemic thoroughly. It was spread by fleas from the infected rats, and the rats were mainly on black color. That is why it is called Black Death. It is a highly contagious disease that erased 1/3 of the population. You can imagine? And it happened not one time, it happened recurrently. Next is the outbreak of these severe incidents like Black Death and 100 Years' Wars, economic crisis, when a war broke down and some epidemic also devastated and ravaged. We can face now due to Corona. We are in a world that is economically and politically ravaged. We are now in economic crisis, tremendous economic crisis we are now living on. So that economic crisis and social unrest also ravaged England and Europe. As a result of the Black Death, the farms were left untilted. Population devastated, farmers died, and due to the lack of laborers, the harvests remained ungathered. People were driven to starvation, illness, beggary, and theft. On top of these sufferings and hardships, there was this burden of heavy taxation to defray the cost of 100 Years' War. This unsettled condition of labor, bitter discontent, growing impatience of the working classes that found expression in popular uprisings, rebellion against the government. And one of these popular uprising is the Peasants Revolt in 1381. It was led by Wat Tyler, Jack Straw, John Ball, and other leaders. And Peasants Revolt was a revolutionary incident of this time. Due to social and political unrest, long-drawn warfare, high taxation, feudal suppression, peasants got frustrated and they rebelled. Again, another point to note down, very important point, that John Gowers Vox Clamantis narrated this incident very carefully. New OS system. So what happened next to that? That due to the huge devastation of the population, there was a growing demand for workers, and it instigated the freedom of serfs. They were changed into regular workers who gave their labor in terms of wages. The class distinctions, which were so inseparable in the feudal framework, now get devastated, loosened. A part of the feudal society began to change. Okay. Next come John Wycliffe and the Lollards movement. At this time, Roman Catholic Christianity was at its supreme power. The church and the clergymen enjoyed unquestioned loyalty and authority. The church commanded enormous wealth and property. The church precincts became the breeding ground of corruption and abuses and obviously superstition and suppression. On the one hand, the common people, those who are below poverty line, they are suppressed, subjugated in the name of God. And on the other hand, the church became the powerhouse of luxury and festives. So people gradually became disillusioned at the behavior and practices of the church and the clergyman. So they get disillusioned by the sermons which they preach but did not follow themselves. Against such disastrous incidents like the Black Death and long-drawn 100 Years' War were enfeebling England, drawing its energy and economic strength. There was fuming a deep hostility and antagonism towards religion and government. A secular spirit started blowing over the mind of England. A growing interest toward humanism and desire to question the orthodox beliefs. Till now, what happened? Every practices of the church and clergymen were unquestionable. But after these changes in society, in political scenario, in economic condition, people started questioning why this should happen. This should not be happen. And following these voices came John Wycliffe. In John Wycliffe 1320 to 1384, these questions and queries found their voice. He opposed many corrupted and duplicate practices of the church and their lives of outrageous pomp and profligacy, in stark contrast to the penury of common people. He is regarded as the predecessor of Protestant idealism in England, and his followers were known as Lollards. And their, and their anti-clerk movement 1300 to 1500 is known as Lollards movement. But apart from this, they did a very significant work by translating Bible. Till now, Bible was the the only one and only under the church, one and only property under the church, and common far from the reach of common people. But when Bible was translated into vernacular language, into English, then it will be very easily accessible for the common people. So religion was now not only for the clergyman and the priest, not they are bounded in the precincts of the church, but religion come to the doors of common people. Okay. So Wycliffe, along with his followers, translated Bible in 1382 into vernacular language for the comprehensiveness of common people. He was hailed as the morning star of Reformation and evening star of scholasticism by the historian John Bell. Okay, so don't get confused with this star theme that Chaucer is called the morning star of Renaissance and evening star of what? Evening star of Middle English period and morning star of Renaissance. And again, Wycliffe is called the morning star of Reformation because he was responsible for the reformation of church and religion. That's why. Okay. And John Bell is a very eminent historian who described John Wycliffe in these words. Now we can see that Chaucer's literary time was set by various social political unrest and oscillations. And at the same time, England was preparing for a new dawn, Renaissance, and Reformation. In Chaucer's writing, we find a shadow of these variegated social and political circumstances. Now, Chaucer's life. Chaucer was born in a wealthy merchant family of London in 1340. His father, John Chaucer, was a vintner of Thames Street, wine cellar, and was occasionally employed on service for the king. Sorry, it was written wrong link, but it will be King Edward III. This paved the way for Chaucer's introduction to the court. There is no such evidence regarding Chaucer's education, whether he joined the universities, then university like Oxford or Cambridge or not. Maybe he joined St. Paul's School, it will be St. Paul School in London. In 1357, he was appointed as a page to a noble woman. Later in 1359, he joined 100 Years' War. He was captured and imprisoned by the French army, but King Edward III was too kind and fond of him. He ransomed a huge amount to get him free. So you can imagine that how much popular was Chaucer in the court. Even King Edward III helped him to get out of the bondage. He was appointed as a valet of the king's chamber and later he became one of his esquires. He was sent by the king to different expeditions as a diplomat. He travelled France, Italy and other countries as king's ambassador, carrying the message of peace or marriage of proposal. These experiences were later exposed in his literary creations that he wrote in various times in Italian period, French period, English period. These expeditions reflected in his writings. He was influenced by such great literary and political figures like Dante, Boccaccio, etc. during his exposure to foreign literature. In his life, he spent most of the time as clerk and courtier at king's office under royal favour. In 1380, he was elected as the Knight of the Sire of the Kent. His fortunes suffered some eclipse when his patron John of Gaunt was abroad and his brother Gloucester exercised supreme power in the country. He was dismissed from the court and there is no income except the pension. That was meager. With the ascension of Richard II, Chaucer regained, Chaucer regained his previous position and honor. His sister-in-law Catherine was the third wife of John of Gaunt. When Henry IV, one of the sons of Chaucer's patron John of Gaunt, succeeded the throne in 1399, Chaucer's prosperity increased as an additional pension was credited to him. In the same year, he took a lease of a house at Westminster, where he died in 1400 in October. He was the first poet to be buried in Poets' Corner in Westminster Abbey. This is very important to note down that he was the first poet to be buried in Poets' Corner in Westminster Abbey. Later, various eminent writers and poets were buried there, like Wordsworth. But Chaucer was the first. So now we will discuss about the English language and literature during Chaucer's time. After the Norman conquest, the English language was cornered and banished to a lower position. We have talked about this in our Anglo-Norman period literary and historical background. In that video, we have talked about that how English was suppressed and subjugated and pushed aside, and French language came into power. So, French was the language of the rulers, aristocracy and in the law courts, while English was practiced among the peasants and serfs. Now, with the 100 Years' War, what happened? 100 Years' War provoked a growing feeling of antagonism that culminated in a long and open hostility with France. And French being an enemy language, so we should not get attached to that. Englishmen thought in that way, and they gradually became involved in English language. But the English language they get involved again with was not the same English that we read about in Old English period. It is a modified version. It gets mixed with French. For 200 years, English get mingled with French. And it is a modified version that has no similarity with Old English period. But it is a new version. It is Middle English period. So it is Middle English. Okay. When Chaucer was born, English and French, two rival tongues in England, were locked in a kind of death struggle due to the rising social and political antagonism. So when Chaucer emerged in the literary sky of England, English language was already recouped with its glory that it lost in the Battle of Hastings. So after the Battle of Hastings, 1066 to Chaucer's arrival in literary sky, there is a long term, and in this long term, English language that was till then suppressed gradually recouped its position, regained, rehabilitated itself in the throne. More stamina with more robustness, Okay. So Latin was also in use for the clergymen and courtiers who are in fashion with the French language until statute came in 1362 and 1363 with a direction that English should completely replace the French language in every official field. So now officially English get the power. English was officially acknowledged or appropriated to the position. And while French was thus becoming powerless over English soil, English was broken up into dialects. Not that dialects of Old English. We discussed it before. It is new type of dialects. No standard form could be fixed now because there are several dialects. No one standard form. But these dialects were totally different from Old English dialects. There are mainly four dialects struggling among them for supremacy. Northern English, West Midland English, East Midland and Southern English. They were different from one another and again subdivided into numerous minor varieties. Among them, East Midland English tended to gain priority in Chaucer's hand. By using this dialect in his poems, he assisted to its victory over the other dialects. Soon, it became the court language. Even in Oxford and Cambridge universities, this dialect got the priority. What dialect? East Midland dialect. Very, very important to note down that among all these dialects, East Midland dialect gets the supreme position. So Chaucer was directly called the father of English poetry because in his hand, this dialect get the prominence. As English regained its power, translation and adaptation of classical literature in vernacular language became a trend. So common people can get more attached with those types of literature. Prose gained some maturity in this time. In Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales, two tales were in prose. Again, John Wycliffe's Bible and pamphlets, Sir John Mandeville's The Travels of Sir John Mandeville are some bold attempts. Okay, so in our next video, we will discuss about the literary achievements of Chaucer that is divided into three periods: Italian, French and English. We will discuss in details about these three periods in our next video. In this video, we covered the social and political scenario, the unrest, the Black Death, 100 Years' War, all these and how society was gradually changing, how language was changing and this type of things. So, okay. If you like my channel, then share and subscribe. And till now, thank you.